Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's great to see you here. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be talking about app monetization in 2017, 2018, which is not the catchiest title of the bunch. I thought the other titles of the other sessions were much catchier than that, but at least you know what you're getting for your money today. So I'm going to ask our wonderful panelists here to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about who they are, who they're with, and what they do, just to get us started and warmed up.
Hi, I'm Reed Genauer, and I'm the CMO of Magisto. We're an app that automates or democratizes video editing for the masses, for consumers and businesses.
My name is Phil Sue. I'm the director of ad product at Zynga. And at Zynga, I work with, my team works with game studios to create in-app experiences for advertising, develop innovative ad products, as well as manage our custom ad tech stack.
Hi, I'm Damon Marshall. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for IronSource. We are an in-app advertising platform, full-blown mediation stack, along with a full-blown ad network for publishers or advertisers to advertise their wares. Zynga happens to be one of our clients. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you guys. So we're going to be talking about app monetization, but of course with this being MobileBeat MB 2017, we want to talk about like the next wave. We've all seen what happens when you have the race to X on an interstitial. We know it doesn't work. We know everyone hates it. So there's much more fun ways to monetize apps. There's much more fun ways to get results. We want to hear about it from all different perspectives, because I'm sure we've got a wide range of people here in the audience that want to hear those perspectives. So let's get started. I mean, in the first instance, what have you seen existingly, before we start talking about the future, that has worked remarkably well, out of all of the different app monetization strategies and tactics that are available?
I'll speak first from personal experience as opposed to sort of industry observations. For us, we're very precious about the user experience, and so the thing that's worked best for us is paywalls and then a subscription model. And so what's unique about Magisto is that we do have a healthy subscriber base that comes to us through the application. So mostly it's one-off in-app purchases, and this is monthly recurring.
I would say, over time, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, a lot of app monetization occurs. I mean, at least in the gaming space, is free to play. So there's this value exchange between content for advertising, and kind of in the earlier days, we have this, a lot of like banners and interstitials, as we were talking about in app, and it's not necessarily great, as great for the user experience, but it's this trade-off that users have really gotten used to over time. Whether you're scrolling through a Flipboard feed or on Facebook or in games, you really everyone's used to now seeing advertising trade-off for content. But and Zynga, we've been very successful in that, in growing a lot of inventory. But at the same time, I think in the future we want to continually focus on the user experience, and that's why things like rewarded video are extremely important, because it's a user opt-in experience, and you change the calculus in terms of how much money you're generating per impression, and you're giving the user the power to kind of engage with that content for advertising trade-off. So in the future, we really want to kind of see some of those continuing to work, improving the user experience both for the in-app experience as well as the creatives themselves.
Yeah, so I'll agree. I'll start with just video in general is starting to hit its tipping point, and we've seen video in all forms explode over the last year or two. Excuse me. But my company specifically has ridden its success on rewarded video. So again, I just talking with Reed, I realized that sometimes you got to talk to the lowest common denominator. Does everyone know?
Hey.
Sorry. But he's like asking very basic questions. So does everyone know what rewarded video is? It definitely lends itself to the gaming vertical, but I was talking to Reed about the fact that you can offer some of those subscription or paywall items in exchange for someone watching a video ad to completion. So that is the first thing that so now on our platform, we were the first rewarded video mediation platform. In the last year, we've seen our DAU through the platform go from about 20 million users to 120 million. So we've seen a very significant growth on the rewarded video side. Now what's coming out, and I think this will probably be one of your questions, but we're now getting into playables. So you've probably seen the ability to play or interact with an app in real time inside of the app that you're actually in. So that has exploded with the help of Machine Zone and Playrix and some of these big advertisers that are now investing their time in playables. And then we also have interactive ads. We're dipping our toes into 360 ads, so a lot of that's also happening.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about rewarded video a little bit more first, and then we'll get into some of those other different types of monetization tactics and techniques, as we go forward into next year. So Tapjoy did some research, as they do quite often, and they found that rewarded video is not only getting 4 times the engagement of any other type of monetization tactic. It is also drawing people back into the app on a regular basis, like a 53% increase in 30-day retention. How important is it to keep on getting people coming back? Because various different pieces of research suggest that 2/3 of the people that download your app or your game actually within just a few hours never come back to it again. We want to get past that 7-hour barrier, then the 7-day barrier, then the 7-week barrier, and it's really hard to get people to stay within the app. So what does rewarded video do for that, and what other ways can we keep people coming back and make our apps and games more sticky in that respect?
I'm going to let you guys.
Yeah, I'll just say that, again, this is a bit anecdotal, but we hear from publishers that Tapjoy is also speaking with, that rewarded video, because you're giving a reward to the user, almost naturally lends itself to bringing that user back to use whatever it is that they received as a reward for reaching that or for completing that video. So we see regular KPIs, both whether it be retention, increased engagement, and also converting non-paying users to paying users. And the reason there's a lot of abandonment that Tapjoy noted there is probably because the monetization that currently is in the game, you're not giving enough content to the user for free. We know that about 95% of users never pay for anything. So you have to find that line between, you have to fill that gap between those that aren't going to pay and giving them something to keep them in the app. So that's exactly what rewarded video is designed to do.
Right. I mean, in gaming, it's a super competitive space, and on mobile, the competition for your time on mobile is extremely high. So, retention is definitely a big issue. And as it's saying, in the past, all the discussions were around, okay, when we do an ad implementation, let's look at, what is the negative impact to metrics that this is having, right? That was in the past. And now we can really look at rewarded video and saying, oh, well, actually, what is the increase to retention that it's driving? What is the increase to monetization that it's driving? And that's a great conversation. And specifically with rewarded video, right, it fills a gap for users that maybe weren't as inclined to pay, but they weren't unlocking content fast enough to really stay in the game or in the app. So now you've given them a way to trade some of their kind of, for their time watching an ad or engaging with an ad, and what's that trade-off in the game that they're making, right? Either in terms of money or like grind and time in the app, that they're making, and now they can advance, they can unlock way more content in the app much faster, and of course it's all tuning in the app itself, right? Like you'll have to create an economy that is conducive to giving some value exchange for the rewarded video. For instance, if you made your economy so tight that giving something away for a rewarded video was so small that you have to watch 10 ads to do anything in the app is not really going to help you. So when planning the economy, you really have to think about that, and so it's definitely a conscious planned decision and taken into design when you're building the experience in app. And also rewarded video, what it also allows you to do is, create this thing, and it's something that we've done actually with IronSource in one of our games is, you have this element of kind of like time gating, so that you limit the amount of there's like a cooldown between when you can engage with rewarded video again. So it kind of makes the user like, ooh, this is something I want, and this is something I want to engage with, and I'm going to come back to the app over and over again. And you spread out that time that they can engage with over time, so that they don't do it all at once, right? Because that's not great for advertisers either. If somebody watches 4 ads like in a row, they're not going to recall anything. Right. But the great thing about rewarded video is you're going to be able to see the ad. You're going to see the ad to completion for that full length of time, and you can break that up in different sessions, so that that the user will be captive for that period of time and have better recall. So it's really advantageous to everybody.
So I come from a slightly different world, and I'm sort of like, the old hair club for men. I'm not only the president, but I'm a client, because Magisto is a content creation tool, and we're also an app looking to monetize. So we're sort of both. And one of the things that we provide is the ability for businesses to create video ads. And so when I think about sort of a level up from what we're talking about, is what is the social contract between an individual and an ad? And one thing that's for sure is that the linear social contract that says, I will watch this ad in exchange for content behind it, is not a foregone conclusion. There's so much content available without having to watch ads that creating content, or it's a spectrum, but creating at the nth degree, creating content that that is a reflection of your brand and is either entertaining or valuable is like the most, altruistic way of advertising. And what's cool about rewarded video, it's sort of in between, is you're allowing somebody to opt in and say, it's not a foregone conclusion that I'm going to watch this ad in exchange for content. You're allowing me to decide if I want to do that. And I think that dynamic is really important. And then the other thing that I'd add is we've been studying like broadcast narrative advertising and the notion of like visual story versus sort of infotainment, if you will, something that feels like native social content. And regardless of whether or not it's showing up in social, even if it's showing up in app, the fact that so many people are, their worldview is informed by social interaction, I mean, that's at the center of our lives, it affects your perspective on what ad creative should be. And so what fascinates me is the way that, let's say within the context of rewarded video, you start to speak to people in a more interactive way. And so the gamification of ads is a very like overt example of that mechanism, but there's other ways that you can create interactive content and value within video advertising.
I just wanted to add one thing from the advertiser's perspective. So far we've made our money on direct response and app installs, and that's what the videos are predominantly the rewarded videos are predominantly videos of other apps. But one of the biggest things that we're excited about over the next year or two from the advertiser side is the brand advertisers are complaining that I can't get any completions of my video. Everyone's hitting the X button or skip ad button, so I can't get anyone to watch my 15 or 30-second ad. And number 2 is I don't know if it's even viewable when it does get played, because it could be above or below a fold of some kind. with rewarded video, both of those challenges are addressed. Number one is I have to watch to completion to get my reward. So you're getting a completion rates of 80, 90, 100%. And as a human being, unless there could be bots, I suppose, but I actually have to push and launch the ad, so the viewability is there also very high. So brand advertisers should start gravitating towards this as well.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I mean, one of the things that strikes me, and you all touched on it a little bit there, before we get into what is coming next and what you're excited about for the future of app monetization, let's talk about this from a non-technical perspective for a moment, because just as with marketing technology, it strikes me that a lot of advertising technology has been driven by the technology. You know, we go and we do something because there is a tool that allows us to do it, but actually that's not where we're seeing the biggest rises in revenue and return on investment. Where we're seeing that is where we include emotional triggers, great creative, getting people to be touched by something as opposed to just driving a message. So how are you thinking about that? Because that's an art, not a science. How are you thinking about that? How do you hypothesize? How do you measure? How do you bring the whole team together to look after the creative side and actually get real results from an emotional standpoint, not just from a technical standpoint?
I actually don't totally agree that it's a art and not a science. I think, to me, engagement is the new awareness. And the reason I say that is because it's information overload. Anyone trying to communicate any message is operating in this din, right? Like, so as an individual, I've got my dad texting me, my wife calling me, my boss emailing me. I'm trying to, get through a conference call. It's insane, right? And so I think the marketing objectives are the same, but the funnel's different. So it used to be awareness, relevance, purchase, and engagement, let's say, right, to extend lifetime value. I think now the way that you win is engagement, and in that is bundled relevance, which drives awareness and ultimately purchase. And what it means is you have a narrower funnel by definition. The funnel is smaller, but more valuable. And that's how you measure it.
Yeah, so the thing that I've been sort of complaining about internally at my company is the fact that although rewarded video is engaging and accomplishing a lot of things Reed just mentioned, scale is an issue. The rewarded video universe, at least until, the gaming space has embraced it, but I don't know how many non-gaming publishers are in the audience, but I'm trying to convince Reed to do it for his non-gaming app, and give something away in a non-gaming space so we can broaden the pie to accomplish these things. But I think rewarded video, and then if we're going to talk about playables and what's coming, that is very much a creative, in-the-moment, emotional thing that, if designed correctly, will make a lot of people happy.
I mean, in terms of I would say, at least from a science perspective, how you measure whether you're reaching the audience with the advertising or creatives is the metrics that we track, like click-through rates and completed views and things like that. And that the job to increase performance on the advertising rests both with the advertiser as well as the publisher. The publisher for setting the right kind of, should we say, mood, or having a really engaging app so that the user wants to stay in the app so that they'll see the advertising. You can also do interesting things like targeting advertising for certain users when they have a win moment or things like that. So that could be a surfacing point for a specific type of ad. So we can create these experiences in app that kind of set up the user for receiving an ad. Now then that responsibility then passes over to the advertiser to have a great experience for the user in the app to, hey, I want to finish the video that's playing right now because it's really relevant to me, or it's really interesting to me. So
Or valuable.
That's the piece I think, the valuable.
Right.
Is it valuable to me or not, or are you just talking at me? And I think if you're talking to me, then it's valuable. And if you're talking at me, then it's about you and it's not about me. And I live in a world that's about me because it didn't used to be that way, but it is now because I can create media like a monster.
This is the only ad product where if you take it away from users, they'll actually complain about where are the ads. Who has ever complained that there are no ads in this game or this app?
Right. So this is out of app, but it's just it's a cool litmus test. So one of the things that we saw in doing there are several really interesting pieces of learning, but one was in this notion of value. So we tested hard sale. These were on Facebook, so it was out of the app, but I think the learning holds true. So we tested these hard sale videos that were clearly advertisements, like do this, download this app. Even for ourselves, we test this, or buy this thing, 20% off. And what happens is, what we saw is that even if it's an effective ad in this case, people watch it and then, or not, and my bet is not, but let's assume that they did, and then they're done because the expectation is that was somebody talking to me. Great, they did. I loved it. Let's assume they loved the message. Next. And what we see when we create this sort of blend, this advertorial, or even something that's really just about a lifestyle and it's presented by a company to drive the head of the funnel, is that people engage with it. They share it. They like it. They comment on it. Who does that with an ad? No one. And so then what you get is greater reach, greater eCPM, and then what's fascinating to me beyond that is we went and then you show them a display ad that's like, do this. And again, it's a smaller funnel, but you've pre-qualified them and you've engaged them. So then when you retarget based on the video view, they actually take action because they feel an emotional connection. It's not just transact. And it's fascinating.
I just want to make another comment that Stuart mentioned that there's a high abandonment rate with over 50% of apps get one visit and then they're out. Let's be clear that the content is what keeps people in your app. Ads may bring, once you have them from the content perspective, ads may help with retention, but ads are not going to by themselves retain users.
But I think where they do is that, to your point, if I can't get enough out of the app and I have to pay, and the ad is a substitution for paying, then cool, I have a way of really utilizing this thing that this other app I can't.
For sure.
And so that's the mechanical piece, and then I'm interested in, let's assume that's a gimme, right? Now how do we make those ads really sing for me and not just be, I have to do this to get to the content?
All right, so it's, by the way, I love it when panelists disagree with each other. It makes for a more interesting panel, right? So we don't want a mutual appreciation society anytime up here. Keep it going. So look, we've got the future coming up very, very fast. VR is a really interesting space. Whether you just think about it in terms of 360-degree video, or whether you think about it in terms of real VR with computer-generated environments. According to my latest research, 62% of US consumers have at least tried a VR experience at this point. Maybe only once, maybe only in a shopping mall, but they've done it. We are going to have 35 million machines in field by the end of this year, with a mixture of Samsung Gear VR and Google Daydream View, through to Oculus and Sony PlayStation VR and HTC Vive. Of course, the PlayStation is the one that's selling 3 times more than everybody else in that particular category. As we think about that, of course, what we don't want to do is have people having this beautiful flying experience, when they're in eagle flight, and then all of a sudden it goes, bam, to keep on flying, you must click this. It's going to be a really jarring experience. But also product placement is one way of advertising in VR. We have all sorts of other capabilities like playables within that space. And then outside of VR, as you mentioned earlier, playables are starting to really come in to that too. So, what have you seen that's interesting that's coming up that is either in or outside the VR space that is much more engaging, much more of a sort of the next level of engagement and app monetization, both within mobile and within the VR experience?
You want to go or you want me to? So, I've mentioned it a couple times. Playables are here. Machine Zone driving the playable ad, but we now have 20 playable campaigns running through our platform now. So it's definitely catching on. And there's still work to do with the technology and the creatives, but playables are here and they're working great. The eCPMs are much higher, so publishers make more money. Advertisers like it because the engagement rates are much higher. The other one is interactive ads, so kind of a choose your own adventure. We've launched that with a couple of advertisers now where it'll play a little bit of the app. Again, lends itself more to games, but at some point in the video, it'll stop and ask you, what do you want to do? You want to go left, you want to go right, do you want to shoot them or run, that sort of stuff. So that's starting to happen. Just to address the VR stuff, it's early, it's too early. I mean, I've seen even Immersive, I don't know if you know those guys, but Immersive's trying to create a VR ad network. And the issue is just the inventory right now. Supply is too low, and we've got to hit that tipping point of supply in order for advertisers to start buying it. I give it another 3 to 5 years before that happens. I might be wrong, though, but that's probably right. I mean, we're still trying to figure out mobile. So, just mobile video is still in the 4th inning, so it's like we've got work to do.
Yeah, we've perennially been in the year of mobile every year.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess with my experience in mobile and looking at VR, I would say I would kind of mirror that sentiment that it's still way too early. There's no ecosystem, there's no standards. I know when I first started at Zynga, there were, I think, a lot more kind of custom kind of integrations were. People were willing to do kind of more custom integrations, and they were kind of high. They were kind of high risk. A lot of dev costs going into these, and whether you're going to get the reach or not is a big question. As opposed to using very standard ad formats like banners and interstitials on mobile, where you can really get the scale and the inventory, and kind of without that in VR. You're going to be in the world of just very custom kind of integrations, and you might have some advertisers trying to test out those kinds of things, but it will never. I don't think it will ever be at scale.
So I am playing the role of the contrarian. I talked to my wife. I play that well at home as well, and my parents. But I guess, again, thinking a level up from like where we are to where we might be, I think part of answering your question is how do we define AR, right? And how do we define advertising? And I think, to me, one is AR sort of, there's a spectrum, right? So is Snapchat, whiskers and ears AR? I would argue it is. And then I think what's happening with marketing is that really, like, I don't think my mom understood the difference between being a marketer and being in advertising. She tells everybody I'm in advertising. I'm not, actually. I'm a marketer, and one of my jobs is to buy advertising. And what I see is that in order to be an effective marketer, it sounds like a rap when a vendor sits down and says, well, it's really a blend of earned, owned, shared, and paid media. And you're like, oh man, here he goes. But it is, right? It's a matrix now. It's not linear. And so what I think is exciting about the notion of advertising and AR is to give the consumer a voice, right? So somehow giving them a seed and letting them do with it as they would. So imagine you have an ad, right, unit, that's editable, or that you can put whiskers on, or Snapchatify, or do something cool, open it up and change it. And the psychological barrier for a marketer is like, I want to control the message, and I do control the message because I know what our message is. But the reality is the consumer controls the message whether you like it or not, and the best case is US Airways. It doesn't matter what they spend on video advertising, television advertising, event marketing, that one video defined them, right, for this year anyway. And so, like, it's a delusion that we own it, so why not lean into the reality and give the user the ability to tell the story? And I think AR is a really exciting way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, yeah, if we want to talk about like AR in mobile, there's so many cool things you can do with that. I would say there's a couple different experiences you can have with AR. One is more of the 360 type ads, right? I've seen one where, you know, it's an ad for a car, and you know, it starts off with an interior of the car, but as you move your phone, you're like moving around the interior of the car, which is awesome. It's way more immersive, and the users will engage with it and spend way more time engaging with that advertisement. One of the challenges I see with real kind of like true AR, where you can do things with a real life image using the camera of the device, is actually for a lot of app developers, they might not ask for permissions. So an app like Snapchat, they will, because it's part of the app. But maybe like Flipboard has no reason to ask for your camera permissions. So in order for them to engage with this new ad format, they're going to need to figure out a way and develop features that actually enable them to use a camera. Same thing with maybe like lat long. A lot of Apple's going to require you to have a really good justification for pulling lat long, but that data is very valuable for targeted advertising. So these kinds of things that app developers would need to think about when designing their apps, as well as leverage for ad creators or advertisers to leverage these new technology or functionalities that are native in the device.
And that's a really interesting point, and we should pick up on that. We're talking a lot at MB 2017 about AI and machine learning and everything that's involved in cognitive computing. Now, the mobile device, by definition, gives us access to more data than ever before. Accelerometer data, location history. Through your location history, we can segment our entire audience based on different personas, because we can understand what type of person they are through geofencing and seeing what types of businesses they visit on a regular basis. And we can look at the difference between somebody's journey on a weekday versus weekend, and all of this information that's available to us. We don't necessarily, in fact, we don't do that with PII, right? But what we're doing is we're segmenting our audience, and then we're able to start driving advertisements that act more like AI assistants, giving the right message, right place, right time, right device. Now, surely that is going to be a better future for the consumer, because they will get fewer advertisements, but they'll be much, much more relevant to them. But that's going to have a serious impact on inventory and cost of ad, because we're going to reduce everything down to just the ads that are going to drive engagement. Yeah, how do we strike that balance? What does that future look like? Am I being ridiculous? Because just as with email regulation, we still have spammers spamming us every single day. So why not still have spammers in ads too? But let's talk about that a little bit from the future standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, advertisers continually, every single RFP that comes down from brands want targeted data, like demographic data, or different kinds of, have many different requirements. And it's on the publishers to be able to provide that inventory. I know a lot of it is also moving programmatically, so that we'll be able to scale that kind of inventory over time. But I think that advertising has a very long tail, and there's as we're still actually in. Yeah, it's the fourth inning of mobile. That if you compare digital ad spend, like mobile is still a small piece of overall digital ad spend. So there's plenty of room for kind of ad spend to shift over to mobile, and there's, for a long time to come, there's still gonna be a long tail on the network side. So there's gonna be kind of premium, targeted inventory, and budgets will continue to move into that space, but you're still gonna there's still gonna be a demand for even kind of just, we'll say, remnant inventory.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So it's basically connecting the buyers and the sellers with a marketplace in the middle, and how much data you can provide to the buyer, how many ways in which you can link or programmatically link buyers to the inventory, and how much data in between, and then the pricing will be premium for this guy's walking by a Starbucks. Starbucks is going to have to really pay a lot of money to throw that Starbucks ad in there, versus the remnant side, which is I just want to blast my Coca-Cola ad to any eyeball I can find. So the spectrum's still going to be there. I think what you're addressing is now the next wave of data and connecting data with the user. But again, I think it's early. I mean, what you just described, we've been talking about it forever. I'm not seeing it for a little while yet. We're still, like, media buyers want easy. They want big buys, scale, data, but easy. So right now it's not easy to do what you're describing.
And I think, that's part of the problem. There's a psychological thing. I get it. I mean, it's practical. You've got so many hours in a day and so many dollars. But they do want easy. And then I don't even think the notion of a funnel is relevant anymore. Because there was a time and place where the user journey was segmented enough that you could say, okay, impression, click, landing page, whatever your first metric is, email, sale. And it really was a funnel. It's not how people shop or explore anymore. It's this matrix. And there's endless permutations. I may get a push notification, see a retargeting banner, get an in-app ad, hear from a friend, see a post on social media. And so as a marketer, I'm dying to know how all this stuff connects. And I think the notion of big data right now is a bit of a lie, because it's created more confusion for me and more noise than clarity. And sure, I can, on one ad buy, I can look at the funnel, but what drives me nuts is that's not how people shop. So like, I look at different verticals, and you can see what percentage of them come to you through word of mouth. And it varies, like, dramatically. Some come 100 times more through word of mouth. And you're like, why? Why is that? Why does this kind of person? I have no idea. And so when I look at big data, and I think that's, like, for us, we're like cutting edge. For CPG guys, they're like blind by data. They're drowning in data. So I don't know. I'm really gung-ho about attribution models and a different psychology for thinking about how we define attribution. That excites me. And then also, the notion of using data solely for personalizing ads, I think, is also kind of backwards, which is like, that's all about conversational AI. And the point is that we have experiential AI, right? So how can I use AI with a mixture of data to create experiences and allow the consumer it spooks me out when it's like, hey, Reed, I know you just texted your buddy about a Volvo, and here's a Volvo ad in your Facebook feed. I'm like, that's weird. I'd much rather hear from the local Volvo dealer, hey, Reed, my name's Ed. If you're considering a Volvo, come and check it out. And by the way, I like, Crosby, Stills and Nash too. Peace. I'm not kidding. Like that's
freak
possible.
Me out.
Well, okay, so that's a bad example, but you get what I mean, which is something that is personalized in a genuine way and not in a spooky I know about you way.
That's you know you're a marketer when you say things like attribution excites me, but yeah.
It doesn't really excite me. It's just how I get paid.
All right, so we've got a couple of minutes left.
It's actually how I get paid.
That's right.
So we've talked a lot about what's coming next and what excites us, but we also need to ditch the stuff that isn't working. Without using the word interstitial, what do we have to kill from monetization from app monetization right now? What is dead? What is done? What should we never darken our door again? Reed.
I think you said it. I mean, the blocker without the consent is a lose for me. It's like that social contract is dead. The notion that I have to watch this ad to get at the content, dead. If that's the case, I'm going elsewhere. You're not talking to me. I don't consider you a brand for me. I'm out.
I wholeheartedly disagree. I'll let you speak first, though.
Well, you talked about opt-in, though. That's different, right? I'm talking about, like...
All right, but I'm going to let Phil start, and then I'll finish.
Yeah, I think something I said earlier on was that people, consumers are used to making a value exchange between content and advertising, and there are certain formats that really work, at least in games. And I don't think, even interstitials, I don't think are dead or going away anytime soon. But there are things that we can do, at least with interstitials, to make sure that the experience is good. So for instance, like if you're, watching an ad that, so I guess quality of even the ads is important, but from a technology standpoint. So, if you're watching a video, making sure that there's a timer on there so the user knows like how long am I going to be in this experience. That, there's been some proliferation of like double close ads. So, you close out of one, but then there's actually like some other kind of like end card after the video in an interstitial. So that, those kinds of things like are more cumbersome for the user and don't really have a great user experience in mind. So I would say, the formats our standard formats are actually not too bad, but it's making sure that we kind of optimize that experience so that for the user to make it a positive experience. Yeah.
We're doubling down on interstitial.
We're gonna rumble.
We've seen it work, so it does work. But to Phil's point, you can't give an interstitial every 10 seconds. Then the users are going to leave. So it's all about capping and pacing. Maybe one interstitial at the right moment. Everyone understands that they're getting their content for free, just like television and radio from days past, and print, where we had ads for free content. But you have to do it correctly. So don't inundate your users with any kind of ad unit. And by the way, we never counted on banners, but we've had a lot of publishers tell us that banners make them a lot of money. So whether or not the advertisers are happy, I don't know. But the publishers certainly are with small banners on the end and getting paid for running those.
So to be clear, I agree that it works for, the potentially for the publisher, potentially for the advertiser. Works. Does it work for the consumer is what I'm asking.
Right, but we are talking about ads. I mean, no one likes ads except during the Super Bowl.
Right. So that to me is the reality. And if you're competing in this attention economy where I watch my kids, like they don't differentiate between Netflix, ESPN, YouTube, and a text message. It's just information. And if that's the case, maybe not now, but pretty damn soon, if you're not thinking about what they want, you're
I
in
agree,
trouble.
but the content, like we talked about earlier, the content behind that commercial is valuable. They're going to wait it out. When I go to YouTube to see my favorite Crosby, Stills and Nash concert, and they don't give me the ability to skip the ad, I'm waiting the 30 seconds because I want to see the content behind the wall.
I think YouTube is like digital television. I think it's antiquated because there's so many other places I can go to get content that I don't have to endure an ad, right? And that's where I'm going to go if I'm, 15, right? And it's pretty soon 15-year-olds are going to be 30-year-olds, and they're going to be spending.
Okay.
So we've learned a couple of things today. Crosby, Stills and Nash and banner ads, so everything old is new again.
So it's what you get for asking old guys to be on the panel.
Yeah. And a lot of food for thought for everybody. I'd like you to all put your hands together, please, for Reed, Phil, and Damon. And we now break until 4 p.m. where we'll see you back on the main stage with IBM Watson, so don't miss that. Thank you very much, everybody.